It's a disease that affects an estimated 60 to 80,000 San Diegans and their families. We're talking about Alzheimer's. And tomorrow, you will get an opportunity to hear about the latest scientific findings when it comes to Alzheimer's and dementia, thanks to a panel of local researchers. Dr. Claire Sexton is here. She is the Senior Director of Scientific Programs and Outreach with the Alzheimer's Association. First of all, Dr. Sexton, thank you so much for joining us. We do appreciate your time.
Thank you so much for having me here.
So let me just jump right in, because I know that you guys are going to be having this town hall tomorrow, and a lot of important topics will be discussed. So we'll be able to sort of scratch the surface on all of this during this particular interview. But I understand that there was a recent study that could possibly have a link between COVID and Alzheimer's. What was discovered?
Yeah, so then there's lots of research going into understanding both the short and the long-term impacts of COVID-19. And this includes the direct effect of the virus potentially on the brain. So one study which was out of Argentina was looking at whether loss of sense of smell then is a better predictor of that kind of long-term brain fog that some people were experiencing, rather than just the severity of COVID. And further studies still are then also looking at the impact of the pandemic as a whole. So they've been looking at our research out of UC San Diego, looking at whether then negative life changes through the pandemic have a negative impact on, people's cognition, but also whether some positive changes, so for example, picking up a new hobby or, becoming a bit more active during the pandemic can kind of ameliorate those deficits seen. So, there's two sides to the coin being examined there.
That isolation, I'm sure, did take a toll, but how people dealt with that would be very interesting to take a closer look at. Eating highly processed foods, does that raise your risk of Alzheimer's later? I know another study looked at that.
Yeah, this study was then out of Brazil. It involved over 8,000 adults, and it looked at their levels of consumption of ultra-processed foods. So these are things like frozen pizzas and chips that have, high fats and high levels of additives and preservatives. And it found the higher levels of consumption were associated with increased rates of cognitive decline over a number of years. So then American diets consist of up to 50% of ultra-processed foods.
Yeah, that's...
So it's, indicating real key areas where then there's potential for interventions and potentials for improvements to, hopefully in the longer term, have an impact on the number of people experiencing cognitive decline.
That's fascinating and alarming, because yes, the American diet is certainly nothing to be bragging about. I do want to talk about this other study, a recent study that focused on sports-related injuries and folks' risk of dementia. Talk about that for a moment, because there are a lot of people that suffer sports injuries as children, teenagers, young adults. Is this having an impact later in life?
So potentially, so then there's lots of research going on looking at, at when you're taking part in these sports. So if it's high school, if it's then professional levels of sport, the frequency of impacts and the severity of the impacts, and then the long-term effects that those can have on cognition and also development of some types of dementia. So lots of work going on in that field to be mindful of.
And when you talk about impacts, are you specifically talking about blows to the head, things that happen in soccer or football?
Blows to the head, so often, American football is being looked at, and other studies then are looking at other sports. So soccer and heading the ball is being looked at, and then obviously boxing is a sport as well being looked at.
As far as looking at some of the other studies, and I know tomorrow during the town hall you're going to have a panel of researchers, the public's invited out. Can people ask questions? I know that this is such an issue that really impacts so many families here.
Yes, for sure. So we're going to be covering really the whole gamut of research, looking at early and accurate diagnosis, what treatments are in the pipeline, as well as risk reduction from all different angles, and there'll be plenty of time for questions and answers afterwards.
Dr. Sexton, do you think in your lifetime that we will see a cure to this?
We're getting closer and closer each step. It's, such an exciting time in research. We're seeing increases in funding, we're seeing increases in researchers. That's illustrated here in San Diego with the funding. That's over $14 million in active research funding. So we're getting closer and closer. There's a lot of hope.
I'm glad to hear you say that. Dr. Claire Sexton with the Alzheimer's Association. I do want to share with our viewers, if you are interested in hearing more from Dr. Sexton and this panel of researchers, here's the information. This is happening tomorrow. Again, that's August 25th at 5:30 at the Handlery Hotel. That's in Mission Valley. This is open to the public, so if you want more information, of course, you can also go to our website at cbs8.com. Dr. Sexton, thank you. Thank you.